power flared again, dark, hungry. She readied. He lunged, but before he reached her, a blinding flash of pure white energy erupted. Boom! The force slammed into the intruder, blasting him off his feet and hurling him into the dust. At the doorway of her hut stood Ajuma. Fury burned in her clouded eyes. Her staff glowed with sacred fire, bright tendrils snapping like lightning. She lifted it to strike again. But the man dissolved. His body collapsed into swirling dust and streaks of light, and shot out of the compound, vanishing into the night like a fleeing curse. Seconds. That was all she had. She raised her staff. It flared, energy threading around it, screaming through the air. She struck. Her staff slammed into the ground. The energy from the staff surged into the earth, raced outward, and flooded the shield. It flared blindingly, and then the shield shattered, releasing a concussive wave that erupted outward in a tight ring. Dirt and leaves sprayed as the force tore across the clearing, slamming into Igar and his serpents. Igar was hurled sideways into a tree. The snakes hissed, thrown off balance, bodies whipping violently as they scattered. Now! Ajuma roared. Ikemba turned and burst through the opening. Behind him, 2 snakes gave chase. Umudike had been a prospering land for as long as memory stretched. But beneath its peace lay an old truth, one whispered only in the oldest families and half remembered by the village elders. Before their ancestors claimed this soil and began to multiply, they had struck a pact with a dangerous species that once roamed the earth freely, a sacred pact that must never be broken. Until today, when one of their own, unknowingly, cracked the old agreement open with his own hands. Ikemba of Umudike, fearless, broad-shouldered, the kind of hunter whose name was spoken with respect, moved through the western forest like a shade. Sweat slicked his temples, and the steady thrum of his heartbeat drummed against his ribs as he tore after the antelope he had vowed to bring home. He had promised his youngest sister an antelope, one they would use to prepare a delicacy for her birthday. And a promise, to Ikemba, was as binding as blood. He had taken down animals all morning, duikers, bushfowls, even a wild hare, but not the one he needed, not the one he promised. Then, when he was on the edge of frustration, the universe placed it before him. The perfect antelope, lean and swift, its coat catching the sun like molten bronze. Ikemba fired. His first 2 shots missed and the antelope bolted. He didn't think. His feet, trained by years of pursuit, carried him forward in a blur. The forest roared around him, snapping twigs, pounding steps, his own breath ragged in his chest. But the deeper he chased, the stranger the forest became. He did not see the moment he crossed into forbidden land. He did not feel the ancient boundary hum beneath his soles. He only saw the antelope flash ahead of him and followed. Then the animal dashed into a lush, impossibly green thicket, vanishing as if swallowed whole. Ikemba shifted left, swift and sure, predicting where it would re-emerge. He lifted his rifle, breath held. The bush rattled. He fired. The echo of the gunshot tore through the forest like a scream. Silence fell, heavy, unnatural, thick as a held breath. Even the wind recoiled. Ikemba approached, cutlass in hand, steps slow, calculated. He parted the grasses and froze. Not an antelope, a snake, a long one, longer than any he had seen in his years of hunting. Its scales glistened like wet jewels, a tapestry of emerald and gold shimmering beneath the dimming light. It looked almost carved, almost sacred, almost wrong. A cold shiver shot through him. Goosebumps burst across his skin like a sudden fever. "What?" he whispered under his breath, his voice barely audible. Where had the antelope gone? He straightened, intending to turn back, his instinct clawing at him, urging him to leave this place, to leave the creature. But his eyes fell on the snake once more. Beautiful, disturbingly beautiful. A creature that seemed to pulse with its own quiet power. Against better judgment, curiosity tugged at him. Ikemba knelt. Slowly, almost reverently, he lifted the serpent and slipped it into his hunting bag. And that was when the world around him shifted. The forest held its breath. Birds stilled mid-call. Even the leaves seemed suspended in time. Only the sky dared to move. Thunder growled, deep and ancient. A cold wind curled around him, biting through his clothes, raising every hair on his arms. Ikemba looked up. The clouds were gathering too quickly, swallowing the light. Unease clawed beneath his skin. "I need to start going before this rain meets up with me," he murmured to himself. He did not see the shadows watching him. He did not feel the ancient pact tremble. He only slung his bag over his shoulder and walked home with doom nestled inside it. That night, the heavens tore open. What fell upon the village could not be called rain. It was a storm born of wrath, wild, seething, ancient. Thunder cracked through the night like the tearing of the world's skin. Light split the clouds, jagged and furious. And the rain did not fall. It descended. It hammered Umudike with a weight that felt intentional, each drop striking the thatched roofs like fists full of stones, rattling the walls, shaking the ground. It was as though the sky was hurling its fury upon the land, pounding the village until puddles swelled into restless, shivering pools. The wind was the loudest of all, howling, shrieking, wailing. It sounded like a warning. It sounded like grief. It moved through the trees, through the paths, through the very bones of the village like a spirit lamenting a fate no one could read. But the villagers, curled in their huts, listened only with mortal ears. They heard noise, not omen. None understood the language the wind spoke. By morning, the world was washed in a pale grey that clung to the skin like cold ash. And then, the dying began. A farmer was found first, stiff beside his half-weeded ridge, his fingers still curled around his hoe. His skin had turned black. Not dark, but black, like oil dragged from the earth's deepest belly. His body looked shriveled, as though something had drained him from within. 2 deep punctures marred his ankle. Before midday, a second body was discovered. An old woman lying on the footpath from the market, her basket overturned, yams scattered like frightened children. Her eyes stared at nothing. Her calf bore the same perfect punctures. Then another, face down at the stream's bank, the water whispering past his limp arm. Then a young boy near the palm groves. Then a mother on the narrow path leading to the raffia bushes. And the worst, 2 hunters found deep in the forest, their bodies twisted in unnatural shapes, as though they had died mid-panic, backs arched, mouths open in silent screams. Every corpse told the same story, a bite, a blackening, a shriveling, as if their life was drunk by something venomous and vengeful. By the 3rd day, fear gripped Umudike by the throat. People refused to go to their farms. Mothers barred children from the stream. Men walked in groups, clutching cutlasses with trembling hands. Huts were sealed. Fires were kept burning through the night. The atmosphere thickened, heavy, suffocating, watchful. Umudike felt hunted. In desperation, the villagers flooded the palace, hundreds shouting, wailing, praying. "Your Majesty, save us! Do something! We are dying! The gods are angry!" The king, grim-faced and shaken to his core, summoned his elders. Together they broke cola, poured palm wine, and offered a fowl to the ancestors. Their chants trembled, their hands quivered. And in the end, with dread settling like a weight upon their chests, they sent word for Ajumma, the eyes of Omambala, the priestess of the land. Deep in the heart of the Omambala forest, where sunlight thinned, where shadows piled like sleeping beasts, stood the shrine of Omambala. It was not one structure, but a cluster of sacred huts, each dome-shaped and crouched close to the earth like ancient watchers. Their mud walls were marred with markings, spirals, strokes, symbols, etched in red and white clay. To the untrained eye, they were nothing but strange patterns. But to those attuned to the unseen, they were stories, histories, warnings. The walls breathed with them. Every marking seemed to whisper. Every line seemed to pulse. The deeper one walked into the shrine's compound. The colder the air grew, as though something powerful stirred just beneath the soil, something ancient, the kind that watched, the kind that remembered. It was an eerie place, not of evil, but of awe, a place where mortals walked softly because they knew they were not alone. When the door of the shrine creaked open, even the forest seemed to hold its breath. A figure stepped out. Ajumma, the priestess of Omambala. She emerged slowly, as though the world outside her shrine was too delicate to meet her at once. Her wrinkled skin shimmered faintly beneath the soft morning gloom. A pure white priestly robe hung loose around her frail form, its hems heavy with cowries that clicked softly as she moved. Her hair, once black, had turned entirely ashen with age, cloud-grey, soft, and swept back in thick coils. She lifted her face to the sky. Her eyes, clouded yet sharp, surveyed the air, the trees, the trembling spirits that only she could hear. She felt the danger. She tasted the omen. She sensed the wound in the harmony of Omambala. A breath left her. Long, slow, weighted. Then Ajumma parted her cracked lips, and from the base of her throat rose a sound. Raw, piercing, sacred. An ululation. A song. A chant that spiraled into the treetops and made the birds scatter. It was a sign to the gods that their daughter was stepping out to do their bidding. Her servants, clad in white, faces marked with chalk, stood waiting in a solemn line. At her signal, they bowed their heads. Without a word, Ajumma joined them. The cowries on her robe chimed with each step as they began their journey toward the king's palace. Then the door of the shrine opened a second time. Another figure emerged, quiet, graceful, young. A girl in her early 20s, draped in a simpler white cloth, wrapped tightly around her waist and chest. Her feet were bare, dusted with the red earth of Omambala. Her eyes were what halted the air. Rare, hazel, cat-like eyes, flecked with gold, slitted ever so slightly, as though shaped by the spirits themselves. They glimmered with a light that did not belong to this world. Eyes that saw too much, eyes that saw too far. She was Ikirika, Ajumma's daughter, priestess in training, the one destined to inherit the mantle. And from childhood, she had manifested powers her mother had only grown into with age. She sensed things before they happened. She knew when the land shifted. She felt the broken pact the very moment Ikemba stepped across the forbidden line. She stood worriedly, watching her mother disappear into the forest with her servants. Her gaze lingered on her frail figure until she was out of sight. A breath left her, slow, heavy, burdened, as though something sat upon her chest, as though she knew the path ahead would demand more. Her fingers curled softly at her sides. Her heart beat once, twice, with the weight of unspoken fears. She closed her eyes. The forest whispered around her. And for a moment, it felt as if the world itself was waiting for her next move. The throne room was so silent it felt like sound itself had been banished. The priestess, Ajumma, stood before the king, her white robe whispering against the polished mud floor. Cowries clinked softly with every small shift of her body. The air around her felt colder, tighter, almost alive, as if the very walls understood the gravity she carried into the room, and when she spoke, her voice did not echo. It fell, heavy, final. "A son of the soil," she said, "one of our greatest and most respected, has treaded upon forbidden ground, and in his trespass he has broken our sacred pact with the Aja Ani." The words descended like a harmattan chill. A collective shudder rippled across the hall. Chiefs glanced at one another, confusion warring with terror. For the Aja Ani were no ordinary snake race. They were ancient spirit serpents, creatures carved from the earth's hidden pulse. Their scales glistened like wet obsidian in their true form. Their strength lay not in venom, but in the raw, old magic that clung to their essence. And in their rare, unsettling gift, they could shed their serpent form and wear the skins of men, walking among mortals unnoticed. Ajuma's gaze sharpened as she continued, recounting the story most in the hall knew, though some had allowed the passing years to dull it. She reminded them of the day, long ago, when the former queen of the Aja Ani, wounded, dying, desperate, was found by one of Umudike's ancestors. Out of pure kindness he had tended her, sheltered her, saved her life. In return, the Aja Ani queen granted Umudike a home, an expanse of safe, fertile land where their people could settle, grow, and prosper. A pact was forged, a pact older than the palace stone, older than any crown worn within its walls, a pact of peace and boundaries. It decreed that the Aja Ani would never enter Umudike's settlement. They would never harm them. Umudike, in return, would never set foot in Aja Ani territory. And above all, no one of Umudike must kill an Aja Ani in any form they chose to wear. If such a crime occurred, the Aja Ani were bound by oath and blood to avenge the death, an eye for an eye. And if, after such vengeance, Umudike failed to appease them, then the Aja Ani were allowed, by the ancient laws of the pact, to wipe Umudike from existence. By the time she finished, the hall was drowned in a thick, smothering dread. An elder pushed shakily to his feet, gripping his staff as though it were the only solid thing left. "Name the culprit," he demanded. "Let the one who sinned bear the sacrifice. Let the Aja Ani take them, and let peace be restored." Others joined him, voices unsteady and sharp with fear. "Name them. Give us their name. We shall hand them over." Ajuma closed her eyes. The flames in the torches flickered wildly, as though blown by an unseen breath. The ground beneath them tingled, soft, like a heartbeat preparing to speak. Then she whispered, "Ikemba." The hall froze. Silence. Disbelief. A painful, stunned stillness. Ikemba, the fearless. Ikemba, protector of the weak. The gentle, selfless son of Umudika, who would rather die than harm the innocent. The elder sank back into his seat, defeated. "No," someone whispered. "It cannot be him." Another murmured, shaking his head. "This is not Ikemba's way." But Ajuma's face did not shift. Her eyes were firm, carved from stone and truth. "The gods do not lie," she said softly, "and I have no power to change their decree." A long, heavy beat passed. Then Ajuma bowed her head and tapped her staff once upon the floor. The sound was like a verdict. "Do not panic," she told them slowly. "I will begin the rites required to appease the Aja Ani, and by the grace of the gods, peace will return soon." With that, she bowed, turned, and began her slow, solemn walk out of the hall, out of the palace compound, her servants leading the way once more. Inside the hall, the king and his chiefs remained seated, breathless, shaken, and drowning in the knowledge of what awaited their land. Ikemba sat outside his hut, the late afternoon sun warm against his back, as he ran an oiled cloth along the body of his gun. His hunting tools lay spread before him, the cutlass he had just sharpened, the small pouch of gunpowder, the hunting bag he was packing for another hunting trip into the forest. Then, the distant clang of a bell reached him. He froze. This is not just any bell, it's the priestess's bell. The cloth in his hand stilled against the barrel of his gun. His head lifted slowly, unsure if his ears had deceived him. The bell fell again. Closer. A cold line of unease slid down his spine. The priestess did not walk these paths at this hour, least of all toward his home. From the back of the house, his two sisters rushed out. Their wrappers rustled with panic. The youngest, Ada, wide-eyed and breathless, whispered, "Brother, you heard it too?" Ikemba nodded once, gaze fixed on the entrance of their compound. The three of them stood still, listening, waiting. Then the first line of the priestess's servants stepped into the compound. At once, Ikemba and his sisters dropped to their knees, heads bowed low. Tradition was clear. No one must look upon the priestess unless she permitted it. That was the purpose of the bell, to warn, to sanctify, to prepare. The rhythmic shuffle of feet approached. The shadows of the servants fell across the ground before them. Then the priestess appeared at the front of the procession. Ajuma stepped forward, her presence filling the compound like a shifting wind. Her white robe whispered. Cowries glinted. Her staff tapped the earth with calm authority as she greeted the household in her low, ancient voice. Blessings of the gods upon this household. May their eyes watch over your path. Ikemba and his sisters bowed even lower. Ikemba's voice shook as he greeted her. Eyes of the gods, may your steps be blessed. What brings you to my humble home? Ajuma's voice rose, calm but heavy with meaning. The frog doesn't run in the daytime for nothing, and a man whose house is on fire does not chase rats. He seeks first to save his home. A breath. Ikemba, son of Maazi Uchendu, rise. Confusion swirled like mist in Ikemba's chest. Slowly he rose. The priestess was not looking at him. Instead, her gaze, steady, unreadable, was fixed on the far wall of Ikemba's hut, where a shimmering, beautifully patterned snake hide hung proudly. All his friends had admired with awe. Many had praised its rare beauty. But the way the priestess's eyes rested on it now, cold, deep, ancient, Ikemba felt his heartbeat stumble. Something was terribly wrong. Eyes of the gods, he said, unable to stop the tremor in his voice. What is the problem? Ajuma lifted her staff, pointing lightly toward the snake hide on the wall. That which you display for all to marvel at is the reason I have come. Silence fell heavily. She stepped closer, still not looking at Ikemba, only at the hide. You have brought calamity upon this land, she declared. You have stepped into the forbidden territory of the Aja Ani and taken one of their own. Ikemba went still, breath lodged in his throat. Behind him, his sisters, still kneeling, heads bowed, gasped softly, their shock sharp and painful. Dread coiled inside them like a shadow come alive. Ikemba swallowed. I did not know. I meant no harm. Eyes of the gods, if I had known. I know. Her voice softened, but it carried the weight of mountains. But intention does not mend a broken pact. She raised her staff again. To restore balance, you must appease the Ajaani. You will gather 10 kegs of fresh palm wine, 50 tubers of yam, 5 kola, 10 white fowls, and 2 great white goats. 2 markets from now, you bring them to the shrine. From there, we will take them to the boundary to appease the Ajani and plead mercy for Umudike. Her eyes drifted to the hide once more. She nodded at one of her servants. The servant stepped forward, removed the snake hide from the wall, and folded it with reverence. For now. Ajuma said. "This will remain with us. It is our only proof, the only thing that can avert the destruction already planned for this land." Ikemba bowed again, shame and fear twisting inside him. "I will prepare everything," he said quietly. "On my life I will not fail." Ajuma placed her palm briefly on the air before her, a silent blessing. Then she turned. Her servants fell into line behind her. The procession moved out of the compound, the bell ringing once more. Hollow, distant, ominous. Silence settled again, heavy, smothering. Ikemba remained standing, staring at the empty space where the snake's skin once hung. His sisters rose beside him, pale and trembling. None of them spoke. The priestess's words pressed on their souls like a weight too heavy to name. Their peaceful world, the life they had known, had cracked open. The shrine of Omambala lay wrapped in a sacred hush. The night was moonless, yet the compound glowed, softly, reverently, under rows of white candles arranged in deliberate, ancient patterns. Their flames did not waver, did not dance. They burned perfectly still. Their glow breathed life into the darkness, chasing shadows along mud walls marked with ancient symbols. The air was cool, still, too still, until something shifted. The calm fractured as though an unseen hand had torn through it. The air thickened, curdled, turned sharp. A foul pressure rolled across the compound, heavy with malice, vile, dark, and dangerous. Something that did not belong had entered. Inside her hut, Ikirika jerked awake. Her hazel gold-flecked eyes snapped open, pupils narrowing in instinctive alarm. Her breath hitched. Something had entered their vicinity. Something wrong, an energy so foul it bruised the air. Her heart drummed once, twice, hard enough to echo against her ribs. She sat up slowly, listening. Nothing moved, nothing breathed out of place, but the feeling only grew darker, heavier, like a shadow crawling beneath her skin. That thing, whatever it was, did not belong here. She rubbed her palms together, grounding herself. The shrine was warded. The magical ward she and her mother had erected around the forest of Omambala was strong, layered with ancient protections. Nothing should have been able to breach it. Nothing this vile should even walk near it without being repelled. So why did the air feel as though something ancient and hungry had slithered into their midst? The sensation grew even stronger, crawling, pressing at her skin. Ikirika quietly scrambled from her wooden bed, silent, barefoot. She sneaked outside. The night greeted her with a cold, breathless stillness. And then she saw him. A lone man, tall and terribly lean, stood at the center of the compound. His dark, hooded robe swept the ground like a shadow with a will of its own. His back was to her. He didn't notice her presence. Before him, the magical ward, their last line of defense into the main shrine of Omambala, shimmered like a curved wall of light, humming with sacred energy as it resisted him. His palms were pressed against it, channeling power so dense it distorted the air around him. Ikirika's eyes widened. He was hijacking the ward, the same way he must have slipped through the outer wards around the forest of Omambala. Lines of crackling light spider-webbed across the shimmering barrier as his energy surged. Ikirika felt the surge of his power, concentrated, focused, malicious, hammering against the ward. The shimmering barrier trembled, cracked, then dissolved into faint motes of light that evaporated into the night. The man exhaled softly, victorious. He lifted his foot to take a step. Ikirika stepped out fully into the open, her presence slicing through the silence like a blade. "I wouldn't take that step if I were you." The man froze mid-motion. The energy in his hand dimmed but did not die. He didn't turn around. He didn't need to. He knew that voice. Slowly he placed his foot down anyway. "I just did," he said, tone smooth and wicked, dripping with confidence, as if he already foresaw her defeat. "That," Ikarika replied, her voice hard and sharp as steel, "was your mistake." Her palms ignited with light, bright, sharp, alive, crackling with the pure force of Omambala. "Now tell me." She took a step forward. "Will you surrender the easy way?" Her eyes hardened. "Or the hard way?" The man's lips stretched into a slow, cruel grin, barely visible beneath the hood. His energy flared, violent, vicious, ancient darkness coiling around him like smoke, and in a blink he spun around and hurled it at her. The blast tore through the air. Ikarika moved fast, twisting, arms snapping out, fingers clawing into the wave of power as she caught the attack mid-air. Her teeth clenched, her shoulders strained. The impact shuddered through her bones. His magic was strong, strong enough to bruise the air itself. But she held. For a heartbeat, the energy buckled, a trembling sphere of wild, unstable power, writhing like smoke trapped in glass. With a surge of her own power, her wrists moved, rotating with precise, fluid mastery. She hijacked the assault and tore it apart, splitting the energy cleanly into two, and in the same motion flung them back at him. The man reacted fast. His fingers arced in a tight circle, and a shimmering barrier flared into existence just as the first blast slammed into it, shattering the shield into shards of light. The second blast struck him squarely. He skidded across the earth, but recovered fast, feet digging into the dirt. A dry laugh escaped him. "Impressive," he said, tone full of astonishment, but more mischief, more malice. His power flared again, dark, hungry. She readied. He lunged, but before he reached her, a blinding flash of pure white energy erupted. Boom! The force slammed into the intruder, blasting him off his feet and hurling him into the dust. At the doorway of her hut stood Ajuma. Fury burned in her clouded eyes. Her staff glowed with sacred fire, bright tendrils snapping like lightning. She lifted it to strike again. But the man dissolved. His body collapsed into swirling dust and streaks of light, and shot out of the compound, vanishing into the night like a fleeing curse. Silence. Shattered. Trembling. Ajuma rushed to Ikirika's side as swiftly as her old legs would allow. "Are you hurt?" she demanded, voice tight, controlled. Ikirika shook her head. "I'm fine," she replied, though the tremor in her voice betrayed the adrenaline coursing through her. Her hands still tingled with fading energy. She glanced toward the direction he vanished, breath steadying. "Mother." She swallowed hard. "Who was he?" Ajuma's eyes darkened, ancient dread flickering across them. She turned and started walking towards the main shrine. "Come," she said, voice low and grave. "There is something you must know." Together they walked into the shrine, candlelight flickering uneasily, the air heavy with truths long buried. The chamber of Omambala breathed differently. The candles burned lower here, clustered in sacred rings around the altar. The air was thick with incense and old power, heavy with prayers spoken over centuries. Symbols carved into the earthen walls glimmered faintly, responding to the presence of the goddess. Ajuma and Ikirika sat upon woven mats by the altar. Between them, raised on a low platform of carved wood, lay the snake hide retrieved from Ikemba. Its scales still caught the candlelight, beautiful in a way that made the chest ache. Power clung to it, old and coiled, humming faintly like a memory that refused to die. Ikirika could not take her eyes off it. Her skin prickled. Ajuma followed her daughter's stare. "This," she said quietly, pointing toward the hide, "is why he came." Ikirika's breath stilled. "The intruder?" she asked. Ajuma nodded once. He did not come to desecrate the shrine, she continued, nor to test our strength. He came for evidence. Her staff tapped the earth softly. This snake hide is the only proof of a truth they want buried so deeply that even the gods would forget it. Ikirika swallowed, eyes narrowing. The Aja'ani. Our trouble with them, Ajumma said slowly, did not begin with Ikemba. She lifted her chin, eyes distant now, seeing far beyond the shrine walls. It began a long, long time ago. She gestured again to the hide. Ikemba did not kill this snake. Ikirika frowned sharply. What? Her voice carried genuine confusion. But when he broke the pact, I felt it. I felt the violation when he crossed into forbidden territory. Ajumma inclined her head. You felt correctly. Ikemba trespassed. That much is true. She paused. But he was not the hand that ended this life. Ikirika's eyes widened slightly, her gaze snapping back to the hide. Then who? Ajumma exhaled slowly. For many years now, she said, there has been a faction among the Aja'ani who have never accepted the pact. Ikirika stiffened. They believe the land that Umudike now stands upon is theirs by right, that our presence is an insult, a stain. Her fingers tightened around her staff. They want the ancient pact revoked. They want Umudike erased, its people scattered, its name forgotten. They call themselves custodians of the old order. Ajumma went on. But there is rot in them, darkness, beings with a god complex. Ikirika's jaw tightened. To them, Umudike is dust. Ajumma said, mortals beneath their feet, creatures meant to kneel, to worship, to offer blood and breath in reverence. Ikirika listened, heart pounding. But our ancestors did not kneel. No, they came here with Omambala. At the goddess's name, the candles flared faintly, as though in acknowledgement. She answered us, Ajumma said, pride steadying her voice. Sheltered us, protected us. Under her watch we flourished, beyond what any mortal settlement should have. And that, she added quietly, was the greatest sin of all. Ikirika understood then, because we did not need them. Ajumma nodded. And because Omambala's protection made us untouchable. Ikirika's hands curled into fists, so they want to destroy us. Yes, Ajumma replied, and they will stop at nothing to achieve it. Silence fell. Then Ajumma spoke again, her voice dropping lower. During the time of your great-grandmother, she said, one of the greatest priestesses Umudike ever knew, blood was spilled. Ikirika looked up sharply. An Ajani was killed. The air tightened. They attacked. Lives were lost in the chaos that followed. She gestured toward the hide once more. But the queen of the Ajani intervened. Ajumma's eyes softened briefly. She accepted our appeasement. She sealed the pact anew. She restored peace. A beat. That queen, Ajumma said, her voice grave, is the snake whose skin lies before you. A chill crawled down Ikirika's spine. And now she is dead. Ajumma continued. And someone wants the world to believe we killed her. The weight of it settled, heavy, crushing. Then the intruder, Ikirika began, is one of those who want that truth buried completely. Ajumma cut in. She leaned forward. If it is proven that the queen was murdered, if it is shown that Ikemba did not kill her, then their excuse collapses. Their justification for annihilation fails. A pause. So they will erase the evidence, she said. And they will use this death to finish what they have long desired. Ikirika's voice was barely a whisper. The destruction of Umudike. Ajumma nodded. Exhaustion crept into her features. For weeks now, Omambala has been speaking to me, in riddles, in parables, of blood mistaken, of truth hidden in plain sight. But tonight I understand. Her grip on the staff tightened further. I know, without doubt now, that Ikemba did not kill this snake. And those who did are already moving. The candles flickered. The shrine seemed to breathe. Ikirika straightened, something fierce settling in her chest. Then we cannot let them succeed. Ajuma lifted her gaze to the altar of Omambala. No, she said, we cannot. The morning came early, not with birdsong or warmth, but with a pale, cautious light that filtered through the trees as though even the sun feared what waited ahead. At the shrine of Omambala, white-robed figures moved in quiet preparation. Ajuma moved with measured steps, her staff steady in her grip. Slung across her shoulder was a satchel bag, pressed close to her side, as though even she did not trust it to hang freely. Within it rested the snake hide, folded with care, wrapped in white cloth and sacred leaves. Behind her, her servants stood in solemn order. Ikemba was amongst them. He wore only a white wrapper bound around his waist, his chest bare and marked with sacred chalk. White coral beads rested against his skin, cool, heavy, pressing the reality of what lay ahead into his bones. His hands were empty. Everything required for the appeasement had already been prepared and carried by the servants. The kegs of fresh palm wine, the tubers of yam, the kola nuts, white fowls bound gently but firmly, and 2 large white goats whose uneasy bleating threaded through the silence. When all was ready, they turned westward and began the journey toward the boundary. Behind them, at the edge of the shrine compound, Ikirika stood still. She did not walk with them. Her mother had given her another task, a sick call to a villager whose breath had begun to fail in the night. Yet as she watched the procession disappear into the trees, unease settled deep in her chest once more. Something tugged at her spirit. Not fear exactly, but warning, the kind that came without words. She exhaled slowly, forcing herself to breathe. May it go well, she prayed. Not to Omambala alone, but to whatever listened in the quiet spaces between fate and choice. Then she turned away, heart heavy, unaware of the danger her mother was walking into. The western forest was nothing like Ikemba remembered. Mist curled low to the ground, thick and pale, coiling around roots and ankles like searching fingers. The canopy above was dense, branches layered upon branches, blotting out the sun until the world beneath lay bathed in a dim, greenish gloom. The air was cold. Still. Too still. No birds cried here, no insects sang. The only sounds were the nervous bleating of the goats and the restless flutter of the fowls. Ikemba swallowed, brow furrowed. This place was not like this. When he had trespassed, the forest had been ordinary. Quiet, yes, but not oppressive, not watchful. Had it looked like this then, had it felt like this, he would have known. He would have turned back. They reached the boundary. There was no marker, no stone, no carved post, no line drawn in the earth. Yet Ajuma knew it. She stepped forward and lifted her staff. She struck the ground once, twice. The sound echoed deeper than it should have, sinking into the soil. In that instant, the goats fell silent. The fowls stilled. Even the mist paused, as though the forest itself had drawn breath. Ajuma raised her chin. Her voice rose, clear, commanding, sacred. I am Ajuma, she proclaimed, daughter of Nwaolisa, priestess of Omambala, voice of the goddess who shelters Umudike. Her words rolled into the trees, into the soil, into the unseen. We come in humility, she continued. One of ours trespassed into forbidden ground. A sacred pact was broken. One of your own was taken. Her fingers tightened around her staff. "For this wrong, we are sorry. We come with appeasement. We come seeking peace." She gestured. Her servants moved, guiding Ikemba forward. He was pressed gently, but firmly, to his knees. The offerings were placed beside him. Ikemba bowed his head, heart hammering against his ribs. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a low hum vibrated through the clearing. Not a sound heard with the ears, but with the bones. From the undergrowth, snakes began to emerge. One, then another, then two more. They slithered out from beneath roots and fallen leaves, bodies thick, scaled, glistening. They moved with purpose, with intelligence. They stopped several paces away, heads lifted, eyes unblinking. Then the mist ahead rippled, shimmered. Light twisted inward, folding upon itself, forming a swirling vortex of energy. It pulsed once, and from it a man stepped out. Tall, terribly lean. The vortex collapsed behind him, vanishing as though it had never been. The forest settled again, swallowing the secret hole. The man walked forward. His steps were unhurried, graceful, but there was nothing graceful about him. Ajuma could feel the rot, the darkness, the vile, coiled malice wrapped around him like a second skin. Her grip tightened on her staff once more. It is him, the intruder, the one who had attacked her daughter. He stopped before her, expression unreadable. They regarded each other. The forest held its breath. "I am Igar," the man said at last, "head of the Ajani Council, overseer of this appeasement." Ajuma inclined her head, masking the jolt of confusion that struck her. "The princess should be here," she said evenly. "She should be the one presiding over this matter." Igar's gaze hardened. "What happens within our territory is none of your concern, priestess." His eyes dropped, briefly, to the satchel on her shoulder. "Hand it over." But Ajuma could not. Alarm screamed in her mind. The queen was dead, her daughter absent. And the snakes? She could sense their darkness, their hunger, their hatred. These were the dark ones. Ikemba felt the shift. He did not know why, but dread coiled in his stomach. He looked up from his knees, eyes darting between Ajuma and the Ajani. Something was very wrong. "Iga," Ajuma said carefully, "this appeasement is not complete without your princess. For that reason, I will not hand over the—" She never finished. Igar moved. Fast. Too fast. His hand shot out, fingers clawing for the satchel. Ajuma reacted on instinct. Her staff crackled. Sacred power exploded from it, slamming into Igar's chest and blasting him away. He crashed into the earth. Dust and leaves detonated on impact, flung high as the ground shuddered beneath him. The snakes hissed, coiled. Ready, Ikemba scrambled to his feet, closing the distance to Ajuma in 2 strides, just as her servants surged forward, forming a tight, protective circle. "Eyes of the gods, what is happening?" Ikemba demanded, panic sharp in his voice. Igar rose slowly. Dust slid from his robes. Cold fury burned in his eyes now, unmasked, venomous. Ajuma knew what was coming. She did not hesitate. She tore the satchel from her shoulder and shoved it into Ikemba's chest. "Run!" she commanded. "Go, now!" His hands closed around the bag instinctively. "Take it to Ikirika," Ajuma said fiercely. "Give her the hide. Tell her to uncover the truth it holds." Her eyes locked onto his. "Do not look back." Snakes poured out from everywhere now, encircling the clearing, sealing off every escape route. Igar's voice rose, low and dangerous, vibrating with power. "You speck of dust," he growled. "You dare enter our land and defy us?" Dark energy flared around him, thick, smoky tendrils twisting like shadow serpents. The air warped as power gathered, compressing into a single, violent torrent. Ajuma raised her staff. Her servants joined hands, forming a living conduit. Their eyes blazed white. Their voices rose in ancient chants, feet stomping in perfect rhythm. Omambala answered, her power threading through them like lightning through veins. With an enraged roar, Igar released his attack. The energy surged forward in a single, concentrated stream of darkness. The air cracked, leaves scattered, dust lifted as it raced toward them. The servants' voices rose higher. They stomped again, and a shimmering shield flared into existence just as the attack collided with it. The impact thundered. The shield trembled, but held. Igar snarled, teeth gritted as he poured more power into the assault. Cracks began to spider across the barrier. Ajuma felt it. Their defense would not hold much longer. She turned sharply to Ikemba. The fear she had hidden earlier was evident now. "On my command," she said urgently. "You run." Ikemba nodded, jaw set. Fear trembled through him, but determination burned brighter. Ajuma faced Igar once more. The shield splintered further. Seconds. That was all she had. She raised her staff. It flared, energy threading around it, screaming through the air. She struck. Her staff slammed into the ground. The energy from the staff surged into the earth, raced outward, and flooded the shield. It flared blindingly, and then the shield shattered, releasing a concussive wave that erupted outward in a tight ring. Dirt and leaves sprayed as the force tore across the clearing, slamming into Igar and his serpents. Igar was hurled sideways into a tree. The snakes hissed, thrown off balance, bodies whipping violently as they scattered. "Now!" Ajuma roared. Ikemba turned and burst through the opening. Behind him, 2 snakes gave chase. Ikarika tore through the western forest like a blade thrown by the gods. The ringing was all she could hear, a shrill, merciless sound that drowned out the forest, drowned out thought itself, like the echo of a bell struck inside her skull and left vibrating far too long. Her vision swam. Her breath caught. Danger. She had been on her way home after she had finished tending the sick villager when it had hit her. A violent prickle had crawled over her skin, raising every hair on her body at once. The air around her had tightened, as though the atmosphere itself had recoiled. And then, fear. Not her own, her mother's. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Something was wrong. No, something had gone terribly wrong. Her eyes flared as she turned towards the west, and without thinking, she ran. Now the western forest clawed at her like a living thing. Branches lashed her arms and face, biting into skin. Thorns snagged at her cloth. Roots clawed at her feet, threatening to send her crashing to the ground, but she did not slow. She could not. Her lungs burned, each breath ripping fire through her chest. She zigzagged instinctively, weaving through dense undergrowth, ducking low-hanging branches, her body moving faster than thought, driven by terror older than fear. The ringing in her ears grew louder. Too late, too late, too late. "No," she whispered, breathless, forcing her legs to keep moving. "Please, no!" The forest blurred. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. At the other side of the forest, Ikemba ran, not with the measured steps of a hunter, but with the raw, desperate speed of a man fleeing death. He tore through the undergrowth with reckless desperation, clutching the satchel tight to his chest as though it were his own heart. Thorns ripped at his legs. Fallen trees forced him to vault, stumble, crash through brambles without slowing. His breath came in ragged gasps. Behind him, hissing, fast, too fast, the snakes surged through the forest like living whips, bodies gliding over roots and stones with terrifying ease. They did not slow. They did not tire. Their eyes locked on him with unblinking intent. And they were gaining. Ikemba dared a glance back, just in time to see one lunged. Time slowed. The snake launched itself forward at his leg, body coiled tight, jaws spreading wide, fangs glistening, venom dripping in thin, deadly threads. Ikemba shouted and instinctively jumped, throwing himself forward, heart in his throat. He cleared the strike, but landed wrong. His foot caught on a root. His body pitched. He slammed into the earth hard enough to knock the air from his lungs. Pain exploded. The satchel slipped, but he clutched it desperately, rolling onto his back just in time to see the snakes lunging again. So close. Too close. Fangs inches from his flesh. He felt the hot drip of venom splash his calf. This is it, his mind whispered. Then, a violent surge of power tore through the trees. The blast slammed into the snakes like a hammer, hurling them away from Ikemba's body. Scales flashed. Bodies snapped through the air. They struck trees and earth with sickening force. Ikemba gasped, blinking. A figure burst through the trees. Ikirika. Though breathless, she moved like a storm given flesh. Hair loose, eyes blazing with terror and fury intertwined. She reached him in 2 strides, seized his arm, and hauled him up with strength born of desperation. "Up!" she gasped. "Move!" But the snakes were already recovering. They surged back toward them, faster now, enraged. Ikirika stepped in front of Ikemba without hesitation. Protective. Her hands rose, moving with fluid precision. The world answered. The air around her arm grew suddenly, unnaturally cold, dense, heavy, coiling along her skin like liquid ice. She felt it resist her, felt the atmosphere strain as she gripped it, not with fists, but with will. Her fingers curled as though squeezing the very molecules of the air. They groaned. They obeyed. The space before her shimmered. Pressure built, tight, screaming, razor sharp. A crescent of compressed air formed, thin as a blade, searing. Ikirika's arm snapped forward. The arc tore free. It screamed through the air. The snakes didn't have time to react. The crescent sliced cleanly through them, swift, merciless. Their bodies fell apart mid-motion, severed scales and blood spraying across leaves and earth. They hit the ground lifeless, cut with surgical finality. Silence crashed down. Ikirika turned sharply. Her eyes locked onto the satchel clutched to Ikemba's heaving chest. Her heart dropped. Understanding slammed into her like a blow. The appeasement has failed. Her mother was in danger. The priestess. Ikemba began. She didn't let him finish. Without a word, she spun and dashed forward, toward the boundary, toward her mother, praying, desperately, to Omambala, to fate, to anything listening, that she was not already too late. But she was. The boundary greeted her like the aftermath of a god's tantrum. The earth had been torn open in long, violent scars, as though something vast had dragged its rage across the soil. Trees lay splintered and uprooted, their trunks snapped as if they were no more than brittle twigs. The air still trembled with the residue of power, thick and sour. There was no Ajani, no presence, no triumph, only ruin. Ikirika staggered forward, her steps slowing, dread clawing up her spine. Then she saw her. What was left of her mother lay amid the churned earth. Ajuma's white robe, once sacred, once radiant, was torn open and darkened with blood. Cowries that had once sung softly with each movement now lay scattered across the ground like broken teeth, mute and accusing. Her face, once etched with wisdom and quiet authority, was frozen in grim knowing. Not fear, not surprise, understanding, as though she had seen the end before it came and stepped into it anyway. Around her, the servants lay in ruin. Bodies twisted at unnatural angles, shrunken and blackened, their skin drawn tight as though life itself had been sucked out of them. They barely looked human anymore, only remnants of people, reduced to warnings. Ikirika's legs gave way. She fell to her knees beside her mother's body, hands shaking so violently she could scarcely touch her. The world roared in her ears, loud, useless, cruel. Too late. She had felt it. She had known. And still, she had come too late. A sound tore from her chest, raw and animalistic. She gathered her mother into her arms, pulling the broken body to her chest as if warmth could still be coaxed back into it. Her cries split the silence, ragged, desperate, filled with a pain so deep it seemed to crack the earth anew. Mother, mother. Her tears soaked into the bloodied robe as she rocked, sobbing, grief and agony spilling out in waves that left her hollow and burning all at once. Ikemba stood a few steps away, frozen. The satchel was still gripped tightly in his hands, knuckles white, arms trembling. He watched her break, watched her world collapse in her arms, and knew, without doubt, that the events of this day would hunt him for the rest of his life.